mobilization of the Mega Sci-Fi Fraternity Incorporated. Welcome to another series by the 6th District, which we have designated as September Empowerment Month. In a moment, I'll provide you with some history of our series so far this month. But before we get started, I would like to have our 6th District Chaplain, Brother Maestro Alexander, to lead us in prayer.
Bow your heads, please. Most gracious and heavenly Father, supreme bossless of the universe, we, your loyal sons of Omega and our like-minded civic friends, pause on this rainy North Carolina evening to give thanks and offer abundant praise for all the miraculous things you have done and continue to do in our lives. We thank you that we are able to participate in this empowerment series of town hall forums, and that we're not in quarantine, at home, or in bed in the hospital. We ask your blessings and high favor upon these highly credentialed and morally conscious servant leaders who have tried and true track records of exemplary service and utmost ethical behavior. Representative Yvonne Holley, candidate for North Carolina Lieutenant Governor, Phi Chi chapter member, Reverend Brother Marcus Singleton, candidate for North Carolina Senate, Chief Justice Cheri L. Beasley, Supreme Court of North Carolina. Please bless their campaigns and give them victory in the upcoming election. We thank you for the mighty 6th District, our District Representative, Brother Kurt Walker, the 6th District Exec Team, Brother Randall Eaton and his outstanding committee, and the entire Brotherhood and our family, friends, and guests. Bless this town hall. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Brother Alexander. Okay, for those of you that are new to our series, I just wanted to share just a little bit of history of our September Empowerment Month. We started the month with a roundtable discussion with U.S. Congressman, Brother Jim Clyburn, on September the 1st. From there, we had a town hall conversation with North Carolina and South Carolina NAACP presidents, Brother T. Anthony Spearman and Ms. Brenda Murphy. On this coming Saturday, September the 19th, we will hold a district-wide voter registration day, where we're asking all chaplains to participate in voter registrations and collaborate with other organizations, such as the Divine Nine, churches, NAACP, and any other community organizations. September the 22nd, we will have a town hall with Brother Rick Wade, who will share information on economic development and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. South Carolina State Senator Brother Marlon Kempson will also join us. And we will conclude our series on September 24th with a roundtable discussion with Omega Sci-Fi's Grand Counselor, Brother Ben Crump, who will discuss social justice in today's world. So I hope you will join us for those upcoming events, and I hope that you will enjoy the series that we have set tonight. I would ask our district representative, Brother Kurt Walker, to come with an opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be present at this, our 4th installment of our empowerment series, where we will be transforming communities through positive action. And again, we want you to take this opportunity to educate yourselves on the issues at hand. And one word I want you to focus on is the word interest. We want to all be listening closely and paying attention to what candidates represent your particular interests. Whether they're Democrat or Republican, we need to learn and focus on the word interest. And before I turn it over back to Brother Eden, I just want to also say that we want to thank also some people who were here on our previous events, such as State Senator Marlon Kempson. We also had Mr. Farad Ali, entrepreneur extraordinaire, and Mr. David Henson, CFO and Chief of Merger and Acquisitions of Microtech, and the leader of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. So we had a lot going on this past month, and we're looking forward to our last events, which will be our South Carolina Candidates Forum next Tuesday. And again, our last event that Brother Eaton told you about, we are hosting our own Brother Benjamin Crump, who will be talking about social action and social policy and procedure and law in terms of the present cases that he's dealing with. As you've seen, this led the victory for the Breonna Taylor, the settlement of over $12 million. So we're proud of Brother Crump, and we look forward to him coming up later in the month. So again, I'd like to thank you all. And without further ado, I'd like to thank our guests who are on the panel this evening, and look forward to a stimulating and educational and informative dialogue and conversation. So thank you so much, and back to you, Brother Eaton.
Thank you, Brother DR. So with all that said, tonight we have the pleasure of having a town hall discussion with our North Carolina candidates for office. And they are, as we earlier mentioned, our brother, our mega brother, Marcus Singleton, who's running for North Carolina State Senate, our Delta sister, North Carolina House Representative Yvonne Holley, who's running for North Carolina Lieutenant Governor, and our AKA sister, Chief Justice Cheri Beasley, who's running for North Carolina Supreme Court. Before we move forward, just a quick housekeeping note to all of our participants. You'll have the opportunity to participate in question and answer tonight. So please go ahead and submit your questions now or throughout the series, and don't wait till the end, because we will take these questions throughout tonight's town hall and let our panelists give you some feedback on your questions. Okay, we'll now move forward with our series. And at this time, we'll have our panelists introduce themselves, give some information on their bios, and give them information on their campaigns as they see fit. And after the introductions, we'll move into the roundtable discussions on topics our panelists would like to address, and some of those that you all would like to address. So we'll start off with Brother Marcus Singleton, then our Representative Holley, and then Chief Justice Beasley, in that order. Brother Singleton, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Brother Eaton, Brother DR, and distinguished guests on this panel. What a privilege it is to be on this platform with the Honorable Chief Justice Beasley and Representative Yvonne Lewis Holley. I appreciate this opportunity from the brothers to share with you this evening. So I'm a new candidate here, so I just want to tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a pastor, I'm a veteran, and I'm a proud member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity, Phi Chi chapter here in Concord. My wife and I, we've been married for 16 years, and we have two sons, one 13 and one just turned 12. And they are the reason for me, and part of the reason for me being in this race, part of my interest in politics, because what we do today, who we elect today, matters for their future. So I'm in this because we have some challenges before us and we need leadership to help move us forward. So just continue a little bit about me. I love spending time with my family. We just celebrated my 12-year-old's birthday, and I just enjoy being with them. So I've served in the ministry for over 15 years. I'm an Army veteran. I'm running because I learned from my parents. My parents were all in all for me. They really taught me what it meant to be a servant. They practiced their faith values of caring for our neighbors, truly. And I'm running because they instilled that in me. I'm running because I understand the importance of standing up for others and doing what is right. Because I watched my dad, he fought for families and children as executive director of the Head Start program. I watched my mom, I witnessed my mom stand up for her fellow car workers or auto workers, and as she worked for General Motors and in the union of United Auto Workers. So I understand the importance of fighting for people. I understand the need and necessity for us to help out others. And the reality is the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. So that it's not surprising that I find myself here, because all of my life I've served. I've served in the Army, I've served as a pastor. Now I'm wanting to serve North Carolina as a state senator. And so I'm running because I think that there's a better way. I think that we have an opportunity here in this election to really turn the tide. We need someone who really cares. And that's part of my whole premise for running, is that we need people who not only can connect with corporations, but people who can connect with communities. And I'm one of the ones who I believe that I can bridge that gap. I can bridge the gap between communities, civic groups, and also corporations. And so I'm running because I want to see a difference made in our state. And we need someone who will stand up, not only for special interests, but someone who will stand up for the common good of all people. And so that's my story, or a piece of my story, and I look forward to sharing more later this evening.
Thank you, Brother Singleton.
Hello, brothers of Omega Psi Phi. I am humbled and honored to be amongst you today. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. Some of you already know, but I am the daughter and granddaughter of Omega men, J.D. Lewis Sr. and J.D. Lewis Jr. Both my brothers are Omegas, J.D. III, and my brother Leonard Lewis are Omega men as well. I grew up in a community of, I was the middle of 5 children, raised in a community of civil rights leaders. Now, 9 out of the 10 were Omega men. Right here in Raleigh, North Carolina, I was amongst the first wave of students to integrate the school systems here in Raleigh, right here in the district that I now represent in the North Carolina General Assembly. And I'm proud of this opportunity for this historic event, but I'm not running to make history. I'm running to make a meaningful difference. I've lived and seen a segregated North Carolina. I've lived in and been part of desegregating North Carolina. And I learned during that period of time, the policies and the differences that the policies and the changes that we made on the everyday people of North Carolina. I understand the courage that it took to make some of those very difficult decisions. I've been in the North Carolina General Assembly now for 8 years. And while there, I have been in a real super minority. And I've been able to, in that 8-year period of time, reach across the aisle, establish some relationships, and was one of the few Democrats that was able to get something done. And that was in the area of food insecurity. I have the experience of the past, the knowledge and the understanding of the present, and the vision for the future. And that vision for the future is us beginning to work together to solve the problems that we now have in this country. We have too many leaders who see these challenges to divide us, to incite and ignite hostility and fear and division, and they marginalizing people. Well, I've been marginalized before, and I'm not going back to be marginalized again. So I'm fighting for all of us in North Carolina. I want to be your voice, and I want to bring to the table all of this experience and all of the training that I have had over the years to make North Carolina even better. So I thank you for this opportunity tonight to come and answer questions and to be with the fine brothers of Omega Psi Phi.
Thank you. Chief Beasley.
To Dr. Walker, to Mr. Eaton, to my co-panelists, Representative Holley and Reverend Singleton, to all of the men of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity 6th District. I am Cheri Beasley, and I'm the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of North Carolina. I'd also like to acknowledge my favorite Omega man, my husband, Curtis Owens, who is a member of Iota chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. I am an AKA, I'm a member of Sigma Tau Omega chapter in Cheri, North Carolina. I have served as a judge for 21 years, and I served as a district court judge in Cumberland County, Fayetteville, North Carolina for 10 years, presiding in all of our courts, family, criminal, civil, juvenile, and traffic. I was elected to the North Carolina Court of Appeals in 2008 and served there for 4 years. I've served on the Supreme Court of North Carolina for 7 years. I've served as a Chief Justice for 1.5 years, having been appointed by Governor Roy Cooper. The Chief Justice leads the Supreme Court of North Carolina, and I'm pleased to tell you that North Carolina has the most diverse Supreme Court in the nation, with 3 African Americans, 3 women, and the first Jewish member in the court's 200-year history. There have been 2 African Americans to serve as Chief Justice, Chief Justice Henry Fry, and he was the 25th Chief Justice, and I'm the 29th. I'm the first African-American woman to serve as Chief Justice. There are currently only 2 African-American women serving as Chief Justice in the nation. The other, who is Chief Justice Burnett Johnson of the Louisiana Supreme Court, will retire in December. And God forbid, in 2021, if there are no African-American women serving as Chief Justice, we are going to really be in quite a bind. I'm also really proud to tell you, and I know you already know this, that my colleague, Justice Michael Morgan, is also a member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity. And I am really so thankful that we have an opportunity to serve together. And he has been just a real treasure in so many ways, to me as a friend, to the court, and to the people of North Carolina. You know, this is my 5th election, my 3rd statewide election, my 1st partisan election. And I do think experience matters. Even though my opponent has served on the Supreme Court longer than I have more judicial experience. And I think every single election of our lives is important. And I know everybody is saying that this one is really important, but it really is important for us to all hear the reckoning of the request and the requirement of people around this state and around this nation, that they're expecting all of us to do better because we can. I am the person in this race who is committed to doing that. And I've already begun to demonstrate how I've best been able to do that. And I look forward to having that discussion with you all this evening. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you all. The first question that I received was, why are you the best candidate for the office that you were running for? That was addressed to all 3 of you. I think you may have covered most of that, but if there's any additional information that any of the 3 of you would like to share, feel free to do so.
Well, I think it's important in terms of diversity. I think it's important in terms of being able to connect with diverse groups of people. That's a better way to state that. And I think I represent that type of person, that in my experience as a pastor, I've served different congregations, from predominantly Black congregations to predominantly white congregations to transitional communities. And I believe that my ability to connect with people, which allows me to lend an ear, to hear the concerns and know what's going on with particular communities and identify the needs and address them. And not only that, I have had the ability to connect resources. And ultimately, that's what politics is. Politics is an allocation of resources. And so we need to know, we need someone who has the ability to understand, hear the problems, and solve the problems and connect people with resources. And I think that I'm uniquely qualified to do that because my opponent, I think, is tone deaf to the issues that pertain to all communities. And I'm running to represent every North Carolinian, not white, not Black, not red, not blue. And I believe that my opponent is more concerned about only corporations. And I'm not here to represent corporations. I'm here to represent the people of North Carolina. And a distinction in that is the very distinction of that. But also that does involve working with corporations. So it's not exclusionary, but at the same time, I'm not in the pocket of any corporations.
Thank you, Brother Singleton.
I'd like to add that, I've had the opportunity just this week to meet my opponent. And he has a very narrow focus, and he's really not about all the people of North Carolina. And I'm running to represent all the people of North Carolina, not just a select few. My race is really unique in that I am running against an African-American male. And for the first time, North Carolina will have an African-American lieutenant governor. But there is a clear choice and a clear difference between the 2 candidates. And my experience, my ability to work across the aisle, and what I bring to the table with knowledge just exceeds what I think that he can bring forth. And I will do an excellent job of representing us all in Lieutenant Governor's seat.
You know, I think it really is important to have an expectation that the Chief Justice lead boldly and that she lead courageously. In 2020, when we have heard resoundingly people protesting all across North Carolina and across this nation at the death of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, but so many others, that we have a reckoning, and the Chief Justice really ought to lead that. And it does take courage to lead in these times, to insist that we acknowledge the very difficult history of the state, to insist that the Chief Justice be the standard bearer about what the expectations are. When people believe that there are two kinds of justice in North Carolina, when we know from the studies that the prior Chief Justice conducted that people do not have trust and confidence in our courts, the Chief Justice really ought to lead and insist that we do better. I've done that. We were doing that before George Floyd died, but it's been really important for us to galvanize, for the leaders of the court system to take responsibility and ownership, to have constructive and very difficult conversations around how we must change and how we determine and can see empirically what that change looks like is that the outcomes in the cases that come before the court must change. I'm prepared to do that.
Thank you. This question goes to Justice Beasley and Ms. Holley. Since you are running statewide campaigns, what is the major differences that you see from the East Triangle and the western parts of the state? Sister Holley, you go first.
First, there's a huge difference. The western part of the state, both parts, both the eastern and the western part of the state are more rural than the Triangle area. And the western part of the state has fewer minorities in it. And the issues are slightly different. Their issues are more about broadband. Well, that's similar all the way across the state. The broadband and some of those issues are just similar, but there's a difference in the people who are running. In the eastern part of the state, we have a large concentration of minorities who have been trying for years to be seen and to be heard and to get resources to their areas. Now, in the western part of the state, they get more resources than they do, in my opinion, in some of our eastern communities. And that's what I see. I see that I see a little bit more poverty there. I see more struggles with farming and really an effort to want more. And I think that as Lieutenant Governor, I'll be able to give them more.
Thank you.
I have to agree with Representative Holley in so many ways. The way we've been able to see that those differences in our courts is as we think about how to use resources and think about what the needs are. The needs in the East often tend to be greater than the needs in the West. And I agree with her that broadband is an issue. It's an issue as we are in the midst of this pandemic and asking court systems to rely more heavily on technology to conduct virtual hearings. The resources tend to be better in the West than the East, and the ability to connect to broadband. So I agree with her in every single way in terms of how resources are available and also how we have to think about connectivity in the other way we've seen it too is in the application of pretrial services or bond conditions. We have seen those differently in the West, where they've been more forgiving, where they're more likely to offer bonds where people sign themselves out, and less likely to do so in the East. So there are some stark differences.
Thank you both. Next question is, what is your plan for the first 90 to 120 days in office? And this goes to all three of you all.
Go ahead, Marcus. Okay, well, I'll start. Well, my first 90 days will be hopefully the first thing I'd like to do, especially if there's a tie in the Senate. I have this wonderful dream about being the tiebreaker in the Senate. And the first vote that I would make would be to put Phil Berger on the back row and take the Republicans out of power. The second thing that I'd like to vote on would be Medicaid expansion, Medicaid expansion, Medicaid expansion, and go on from there. I had a platform called Ally, which is an affordable living initiative, which is to bring together public-private partnerships all across the state, urban and rural, Democrats, Republicans, nonprofits, and businesses, and let's sit down and look at our resources that we have and see what low-hanging fruit we can do immediately and what kind of legislation we might need to do from there. And that's in the area of housing affordability. That's in the area of jobs, making jobs, economic development, living wages, food and health security, because so many of our people during this COVID has brought a lot of this stuff to our attention, and transportation, because if you can't get to work, you can't work. So those are things that I will begin to start in the Lieutenant Governor's office to begin to pull together a team across the state to make something happen.
Thank you. Brother Singleton?
Yes, sir. So I would, again, echo that, advocate for Medicaid expansion. That's the #1 priority as we enter into this season, is that we need to advocate for Medicaid expansion, and we need to protect the Affordable Care Act. We need to make sure that we are providing health care for all our citizens here in North Carolina. Secondly, I would work on behalf of teachers, continue to work and pushing for increasing pay for our educators and also our educational support professionals. And then lastly, I would have listening sessions. I want to hear from people within our district. I want to know exactly what's going on, and I'll have a different lens versus being a candidate. Being elected, and there's a distinction between elected. Being elected, I mean being a candidate and being elected. Right now, we're talking about ideas. And then as I'm elected, I can begin to implement those ideas. So I want to really hear from our constituent, or from my constituents in District 36.
Okay. Chief Beasley, this is might be a little bit different from you because it's going to be a continuation. It's not going to be a new day. So you can kind of share with us what your continuation will look like for you.
Well, and I'll tell you, in the first 90 days when I became the Chief Justice, we had just experienced Hurricane Florence. And so in the very same way that I have some emergency directives in place now around the pandemics and how the pandemic is impacting our courts, we didn't have courts in session. I mean, the courthouses were completely uninhabitable in the eastern part of the state. And so to be able to make sure we were making allowances around court deadlines and that kind of a thing, I was having to monitor that and issue directives around the safety, health, and welfare of the people in that part of the state. I'm doing that now around the pandemic now. I am prayerful that we will be in a very different place at the beginning of the year, that we will have a vaccine that is reliable, that we will be talking about COVID-19 as something of the past. But the pandemic has, in every way that it has shaped communities and families and wreaked havoc with so many people, it has done the same with our courts. And so I am hopeful that we will be in a different place. I am looking forward to continuing and solidifying some of the initiatives that we've already begun to instill trust and confidence in our courts, which really has been my whole focus the entire that I've been Chief Justice. When we know that people don't have trust and confidence, and so I've created a whole lot of programs around faith and justice and access and restoring thousands of people's driver's licenses and a host of other programs.
Thank you. What do you all see as the biggest focus as we close in on the November 2020 election cycle? Brother Marcus, we'll start with you.
Well, definitely it's voter turnout. I mean, that's critical. If we don't turn out the vote, then we know that it could go a different way. So voter turnout, #1. Secondly, 2, am I breaking up?
Yes.
Yes.
Am I still here?
Yeah, you're here. Okay.
So turnout, #1. And then secondly, to Chief, we have to make sure that there's confidence in the election, because the other side is going to try to make if they lose, they're going to try to make it a big issue. And so we're going to need to instill confidence in our elections, and we're going to need lawyers. We're going to have, I hope that we have our lawyers on deck ready, because it's going to get ugly, and we should be preparing for that. That's my biggest concern, because we're going to win, and we're going to win big, and it's going to get ugly. And so we need our lawyers on board ready to fight the battle.
Thank you.
He's right. The focus should be on the get out the vote effort in particularly. You know, we all know that we're in a COVID, and we all know that African Americans are more susceptible and minorities are more susceptible to this disease than others. And we have a population who's afraid. But we also have been here before, where we've gone to the polls when we were afraid before. We have a history of showing up. And it's just critical that we pull upon that history now and we get out the vote.
I agree with Representative Holley. I think it is so important, and I'm so thrilled that the 6th District is doing this forum this evening, because so many folks are going to rely on you all to ask, to figure out what to do with the ballot. North Carolina has the 3rd longest ballot in the nation, and people will know what to do at the top of the ballot. Most folks are already dug in. They know who they want to vote for president, governor, US Senate, and all that. But I would encourage you all to please encourage folks to vote the entire ballot. Every single position on the ballot impacts people's everyday lives, whether they realize it or not. And so it's important that you all are the people who understand how important this election is, how important these races are, every single one of them. And as you serve as ambassadors for the importance of voting and the importance of civic engagement, people need that kind of leadership and understanding. It's the same kind of guidance that you provide all year long. And the fact that we need that kind of guidance around this election is hugely important. People often really don't understand. I mean, everybody is saying that the 2020 election is the most important election of our lives, but the reality is every election, when you think about the fact that people have risked their lives and literally lost their lives for the right to vote, every election in North Carolina and around this nation and world is the most important election of our lives, and we ought to vote like it.
Thank you. Along those same lines, we mentioned the confidence in the election and getting out to vote. And then Chief, if you mentioned the down ballot, not just looking at the top, but the whole ballot. What kind of direction or information can you all provide to us about absentee ballot request forms, absentee ballots in themselves, early voting, and voting in person?
Ooh. Let me say something. I just got today some information that says that twice as many absentee ballots that have already been submitted by minorities are being sent back for their not being complete or something not being filled out right on that ballot form. So we need to make sure that people know how to fill out that ballot properly. They'll get an opportunity to finish filling it out and sending it back in. But we need to make sure that they do that. A lot of people think they've already voted. Some of it is the registration form to ask for the ballot. They may not have figured out how to actually put all the information in there, and that is being returned. Now that breaks my heart. But then on the other hand, I've talked to our postal workers here, and they are all promising personally to make sure that if you do vote by mail, that they will make sure that your mail will be treated with first class and try and to get there in a timely manner. The other part of that, early voting, I think early voting is that's when I'm going to vote, because I like to go down in person. Every effort is being made to keep you socially distanced. People are going to give you masks. They're going to be people who are going to have hand sanitizers, so much to try to make sure that you are safe in this process. So on early vote and on election day, every effort is being made by so many community groups to make sure that this happens, and it happens in a safe and fair manner.
Thank you.
I would just echo that it's important, even in this election, that we vote early and get out and get our votes early, because again, I feel like a lot of people are, or I get that a lot of people are suspicious about this upcoming election. And I think the earlier we vote, the more ballots that we have in hand is going to be, will help this process. And so people are sickly, and this opportunity to early vote is important. And then also with the absentee ballots, it's important that we fill them out right and trust them, because we've gotten maybe 5 or 6 absentee ballot applications here, and each time my wife is saying, "It's legitimate. Is this legitimate?" And that just speaks to the climate that has created. So I just want to emphasize that we vote one of the 3 ways. Take advantage of it by prep vote early or absentee.
Representative Holley mentioned that some of the absentee ballots are being returned to African Americans, and she's right. And primarily the piece of information that's missing is the witness signature or the witness's information. So people have got to be very careful to make sure to fill that piece in. The other thing is that it's important to know that even if you request a ballot by mail, you can mail it back or you can turn it into your local Board of Elections. So even if you request it, you still have to have the witness signature, but then you can physically take it to the local Board of Elections if you wish. It's important to remember that the last day to register to vote is October the 9th. Early voting begins October 15th through October 31st, and Election Day is November 3rd. The State Board of Elections Director, Ms. Bell, indicated that they anticipate that 30% of the people will vote by mail, 50% will vote early, and 20%, only 20% will vote on Election Day. So it's important for everybody to have the information as early as possible, because 80% of the people will vote before Election Day.
Thank you. This next question is addressed to Chief Beasley and Representative Holley. I've seen stats that the Black women have the ability to influence election results. Will you all provide your insights on this and the importance of the African-American female vote?
Chief Justice, I'll let you begin.
The statistics say it all. I mean, it is true. And it's not just in North Carolina, it's around the nation that African-American women turned elections, and that bears out in the statistics. The other piece of it is African-American women also talk to other people in their communities about who to vote for. And so they're not just influencing elections by how they vote, they're influencing elections by who they talk to, and that's hugely important.
And that's so true. And I'd like to say that the African-American women who are running in North Carolina are trying to work together to get African-American women excited about voting and excited about the possibility of having Chief Justice Beasley be there again, and the next lieutenant governor being an African-American female, and the commissioner of labor being an African-American female, and having Judge Covich move up and into another judicial seat. And we need to get them excited, because when they get excited, they talk about their excitement, and they do more than that. They'll bring somebody to the polls or make that extra effort. And that's what we want to do here today with the Brothers of Omega. We want to get you excited about the possibilities of electing 4 beautiful women, competent and capable women. You know, let me say this, you know, all up and down our ballot, especially our council of state races and even further down, we have some of the most qualified candidates than we've ever had before. And the African-American candidates are just superior candidates. We are overqualified in many instances for the jobs that we're trying to run for. So we have an opportunity to make some history in North Carolina when we turn North Carolina blue.
Sister Holley, with a follow-up question, we talked about, you mentioned earlier, it'd be the first time that we'd have an African-American lieutenant governor. Do you feel your opponent was planning to run against you?
No, I did not. He ran in the field of 9. I think that the Republicans were so excited about having a Black man speak Trumpism and to have, you know, to talk about those same things and do some of the same things that some of the rhetoric that I call hardcore, and some of the divisive language, use that divisive language to divide. And I think that they were so excited about having one of them to say, oh, we have an African American, here he is. And I think that that's one of the reasons why he, in a field of 9, was able to win that primary race. You know, now there were 4 African Americans that ran on the Democratic side. So we had a very competent and capable field of candidates of African Americans there. But this is the first time that they've actually been able to have one run. So I don't think he was a plant. I think that they took advantage of the opportunity to sometimes say that they're not prejudiced. Look, we'll vote for him. You know, I mean, you asked me, I'm giving you my honest answer on that one.
Thank you very much. Let's change gears, which is something that's near and dear to all of us. And I'll ask you all to provide your comments on the Black Lives Matter movement and the violent social unrest versus peaceful protests in our state and the states across the country. Brother Singleton.
Black Lives Matter movement, I believe, has been misrepresented by the other side. And for us to just understand that is a fact. They're just stating a simple fact. Black Lives Matter. Not any less than, not any more than any other lives. That Black Lives Matter. Because we're in a system where it is clear that that hasn't been acknowledged by our system. So for me, it's just a simple, we can't politicize it. It's just a matter, it's a sociological fact that Black Lives Matter. And so I think we need to move it away from the politics of it and focus on people. And again, as I said earlier, one of the reasons why I'm running is that I care about people. And Black Lives Matter, and for someone not to be able to articulate that a group of people matter, that tells us something. And so for me, Black Lives Matter is a simple statement of fact, and I can stand by that. And the problem is that everyone else tries to politicize it, and they'll use phrases like all lives matter. Well, we're not talking about all lives. The question is around Black lives. So Black Lives Matter. So I think that we have had a great turnout with the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's been largely misunderstood. And so, but I think if we just look at, from a political space, if we just look at things, people are saying there are conditions in our country, there's conditions in our cities are exclusionary, or Black lives are being left out. And so we're simply saying, provide a solution that are within our communities, you know, around criminal justice, around healthcare, around affordable wage. Every issue within our communities we're impacted, every negative issue, you know, whether it's around, you know, health morbidities, they impact Black lives more. Where criminal justice lives are impacted more, negatively impacted. So all Black Lives Matter is saying is that we want some that recognizes that there is an injustice against a group of people. Black people, and I'll add even people of color. And so we need people in office who get that. And that's why I know that I'm distinguishing myself from my opponent, because I get that. Black Lives Matter, not at the exclusion of someone else, but at the inclusion of all people.
Thank you. Sister Holley, let's let Beasley go next. I know she has another engagement at 9 o'clock. So we'll let Chief Beasley go in case she needs to hop off early.
You know, I think the protests have been really fruitful. I think our conversations across the board are very different. I think a lot of folks have been jolted into a very different reality. And I think, I mean, even as I talk with large partners in law firms to talk about the lack of diversity and how it's been really important to make sure that you don't just have 2 associates there with no support, that it's really important that these associates have the same opportunities for partnership, just as those opportunities are available to Jim's son down the hall. And those conversations already in a short period of time have been very fruitful. So the protesting has been helpful. I'm sorry that there's been an effort to be divisive around it, because I believe the protests have been offered an opportunity to allow people to really think differently. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be challenging. We didn't start with difficulties around racism and racial and gender disparities yesterday. We really didn't. And so it won't be a week. We have to have a long-term commitment, but I believe the protests, and I understand that folks are concerned about violence and all that, but that's the detraction in my mind around what the real issues are. The folks who've been out there who have been peacefully protesting, which has really been the majority of folks, have every right to do that. They have the First Amendment right to do that, and a constitutional right to do that. And I believe that in so many ways, those protests have been fruitful and they have moved our nation forward. And I'm so proud, especially of the young people who have used their voices in that way. What I am hopeful, though, is that they don't stop speaking in those protests, that they have to understand that in order to really leverage the power that they have, it takes protest plus voting.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how much you can comment on this, but what are your views or action items towards police reform? And I don't know if Chief Beasley, if you can make comments on that or not.
You know, my focus really has been on the reform for courts. We got a lot to do there. We talk a lot about criminal justice, but the reality is civil justice is a real reality for people of color as well. When you talk about evictions, that's civil justice. When you talk about juvenile justice, that's civil justice. When you talk about family court, that's civil justice. And so my focus really has been on the justice system and how we can improve, do better, and have measurable improvements in our outcomes. I know, and I'll have a task force that you'll hear more about very, very soon. But it won't be a task force, it'll be a commission, because it takes a long-term commitment to really get something done. The governor has a task force on racial justice, and I'm sure we will be working, my commission will work with this task force, and that task force will focus a lot on policing.
Thank you. Sister Holley?
First of all, I want to say, I think Black Lives Matter is a wonderful, wonderful movement led by wonderful, bright, and talented young people. I think the vilification of it was deliberate. I think that they've done everything to try to say that it is not a good thing because it is bringing attention to the inequities that are ingrained and the systemic racism that's been brought in our system. It has brought attention to the murdering of our children on the streets. It's brought attention to the inequities that are happening every single day in our lives that they have chosen to ignore. And so they're vilifying it to make it seem like the Black Lives Matter crazy bunch of young hooligans. Now, as far as the violence is concerned, no one condones violence, but I understand it. I understand the frustration that some people feel, but they have no choice. Now, yes, there'll always be some bad apples, and I believe that in some instances that even there are some plants being put into the Black Lives Matter movement and some of these protests so that it can get a bad name. But when you listen to the young people and you listen to them talk and you look at the fact that this has become a global movement for the underserved and the underrepresented people in this world, that we cannot be more proud of what has happened. And we have to make sure that the focus stays on the positive and the intent of it and not let the negative chaos that they're trying to put around it to vilify the Black Lives Matter movement. And those of us from the civil rights movement, you know, they did that. They were successful with the Black Panthers, who were feeding people, who were doing a lot of really good things, but they were able to vilify it. They tried to vilify Martin Luther King, you know. So I say that we as a people need to hold Black Lives Matter up with pride. We need to keep these young people out there. Those of us who've been there before need to continue to advise them and help them through this process, because it's a movement and not a moment. And I hope that it does not result with the fact that we lose a few statues and we get a Juneteenth holiday. I want to see some policies. I want to see some real decisive changes made from this Black Lives Matter movement.
Thank you.
And just to piggyback on that food protests are so important because they push the needle. They put pressure on elected officials to do what they should have done anyway, and that is what is right. So when these protests are rising up, they have to continue. And just with some of the work I've done around community organizing, is that if the work done on the street doesn't meet a willing ear in the legislature, then nothing can happen. So we need on the legislature who understand the issues on the street, who have an ear and are inclined to act on the issues on behalf of the people and doing simply what is right. You know, Black Lives Matter isn't all of a sudden that people decided that they wanted to express themselves. They were forced into, or we were forced into this place where we had to protest. Just like Representative Holley said, it's historical. Civil rights movement was born out of, you know, the acts of justice. So we can't vilify something that began from a system that's institutional. We have to recognize that we have ownership. Those of us in power, we have ownership of the issues on the street as well.
Thank you. Chief Beasley, before you get out of here, a couple things. Can you talk to us with the high death rate of African Americans with COVID, which is a second pandemic that we'll talk about tonight? Can you tell us just how important it is for us to listen and do what we need to do as people of color? And then along those same lines, that our kids are being educated through distance and remote learning. Can you provide us some information on what we can do to make sure that we don't continue to lose lives by being careless, and what we can do to help our kids get the education that they need?
And Mr. Eaton, I promise you, I'm not running off. When you say we're finished, we're finished.
Okay, thank you.
You know, our health is so important. We have all heard the science, and I am consulting with the governor's office. I'm consulting with Secretary Cohen, the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, and the CDC every single week, because I need to know that, make those determinations for our courts. But the science is just clear. And the one thing we know for sure is that wearing masks makes a difference. I have certainly mandated masks in our courts across North Carolina. And we know that we need to wash our hands, keep a safe distance, and wear a mask. And I just don't know why we would take chances. We have seen the thousands of people who have died in North Carolina and around this nation. And the studies have also shown us that African Americans and people of color have the kinds of health conditions that accelerate and advance COVID-19 diagnoses for us. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. I mean, we just have to do what's right. I'm going to let Representative Holley speak more on school, so I'm sure she knows more about it. Kurt and I have twin sons who are college students. Amazingly, they've not been sent home. And to think about educating young people in school and parents trying to figure that out and working and balancing all that, sounds like a lot. I know the governor today ordered that elementary schools can now be held in person, and I think he's deferring on high schools, but I think she would probably be better able to speak to that.
Yes. First, I want to talk a little bit about the COVID-19 in general. I have actually found that African Americans are a little more cautious about it than the majority community. We recognize the fact that we have comorbidities and health issues on a chronic level. And we also recognize the fact that we are mostly more of the essential workers than anybody else. So we are making more of an effort to be as careful as we can. And I told a group just last night that when I wear a mask, I'm not wearing a mask for me. I'm wearing a mask because I respect you and I care about your life. And I hope that you would wear a mask because you respect me and care about my life. And I'm just floored by the lack of science and the lack of common decency that people have, that I have a right not to wear a mask. Nobody's questioning your right not to wear a mask, but we question your judgment not to wear a mask. And I think that that's the big issue there. Now, as Representative Chief Justice Beasley was talking about as far as the elementary schools and the schools, I want to say that this has not been an easy decision for the Governor Cooper to make during this COVID. And he didn't think about the politics. He followed the science. And he followed the science and he said, I'm going on the side of people's lives. You can rebuild a business, but you can't bring anybody back from the dead. We had 3,000 people in North Carolina who have passed away from the COVID. We've had 200,000 people who have suffered from COVID in North Carolina. Now, because of some of his good measured reopening, and everything is still an experiment. Nobody's been here before. We don't know if this is going to work. He has chosen to open elementary schools and allow that process to happen. But I assure you, if it doesn't work out, he will close it back down. But we are beginning to see some progress and some slowing in our numbers of cases and our numbers of severity of the cases that are coming out. So that is one of the reasons why he's choosing to begin to open up on the elementary level. It seems like our older students feel that they are invincible a little bit, as we can tell from our college campuses. And I remember those days when I thought I was invincible, what happened to the other guy. But COVID is a whole nother ball game. And I am proud and will be proud to back up Governor Cooper with whatever decision that he makes on this COVID response.
Thank you.
So I just want to add to that, is that COVID also has exposed the disparities within our systems. And it also has highlighted the necessity for healthcare reform, passing Medicaid expansion, so that people are covered, because the only thing that we have is our health, and that we have to protect the people. And in addition to that, we've heard silence from our leadership on the other side around this issue. And that's costing lives, because people are looking to leadership to guide them through difficult times. And we need people who are willing. I like what Representative Holley said, that Governor Cooper didn't do the political thing. He did what was right on behalf of the people. And we need leadership like that. Another thing about around COVID-19 and schooling is that it has told us, teaching us that we need to look at, and no one is, the way we're doing life these days. Our world is changing, and we need to provide our families with opportunities to be able to care for their children. And so about the disparities economically that COVID has exposed, and it also has affected family life. So we need to begin looking at how families are impacted in ways that we can create opportunities where families can, if they need to be home, that they can be home with their children. Because someone, essential workers, labor, working, minimum wage workers, trying to say, they don't have that luxury that some others have. And we need to be really considerate about that as we move forward, as COVID has really highlighted the need for meeting the needs of each people at different levels of their workforce, in the workforce.
Okay, real quick, because we're approaching our end of our time, but the census is still very, very important. And I want to make sure that we don't forget that. So can you all speak on the importance of the census with the deadlines approaching? And then sort of kind of along those same lines, we have a question on how you ensure that HBCUs in the state of North Carolina receive their fair share of financial support at the state level.
Well, okay, I'll start with that. Well, let me say about the census. When they changed the date to end the census count to the end of September, it was another deliberate attempt to disenfranchise minorities, because they knew that doing early votes, sitting out in front of those places and those polling places would have been people there to take the census and to try to make sure that as people came in to vote, that they'd also fill out the census. And they've done everything they could in Hispanic and other marginalized communities to try to stop the census. It is so important because it's where the money goes. It shows how many representatives or elected officials you get in certain communities. It shows where resources, financial resources go to help out in certain situations for healthcare and other things that our federal dollars go to. As far as our HBCUs, you know, I have been a gladiator in that North Carolina General Assembly now for 8 years. And every year we talk about parity. We're talking about equity in what they give our HBCUs. And it's critical that they're given their fair share. We can watch, you know, give millions and millions of dollars to some of our institutions of similar sizes to ours for buildings and programs. But then when it comes to our community, we're given a few to fix up something that's already old or maybe out of step. I believe it's going to be when we elect more Democrats or more people who understand that importance of the HBCUs, then we'll begin to see what we can, more funding going to them.
Very briefly, Brother Singleton.
But without people in office that understand the importance of HBCUs, that funding miss us. Make sure that we elect people who understand the importance of HBCUs and their impact on our society. We know that they produce the majority of PhDs. We know that Black PhDs, I should say. And so we gotta make sure supporting HBCUs. And then for, I'll just say yes to what Representative Holley said around the census. It's important because, again, politics boils down to an allocation of resources. And the reason that this census is so important this year is that whoever is already determine where those resources go. And so we have to make sure that we don't allow the Republicans to continue to slice up the legislative map and allow people to legislative districts for their benefit.
You know, I would certainly agree with everything that's been said about the need and the responsibility of all of us to complete the census. As to HBCUs and funding, you know, I've been speaking at HBCUs a lot recently, but I always have. But one of the things I've been saying recently is that, you know, voting really is important. I mean, when this summer, during this pandemic, when schools were not in session, Duke and UNC had a contest around who could register the most voters. I mean, it was fascinating to me that even during a pandemic, at a time when people really are not in school, they had this contest. People take notice when universities and students use their voices collectively. So I know that a lot of the sporting organizations with a lot of the universities are galvanizing around how best to talk about social justice issues and that kind of a thing. But voting is so important. It's the same kind of empowerment, and you cannot ignore it. It doesn't even matter how these students vote on these universities' campuses. If they're voting en masse, the world will have to take notice. And those are the kinds of things. There's a nexus between turning out the vote at university campuses and funding for research. There's a nexus between voting on university campuses and whether or not you get the best resources. I mean, and I appreciate exactly what Representative Holley is saying, and I agree with that. But on the other hand, there really are some things that these students and faculty and staff and professors can do to be the standard bearers around why voting is so important. It's not just about electing the next set of officials. It's about using your collective voices and saying that my vote and my voice matter. And then you will be heard in a whole lot of areas.
Thank you. Last question of the night. What direction or insights do you have to share with us about overcoming voter suppression, intimidation, and voter purge? Chief Beasley, you want to start?
I am not going to answer these questions because these are the very kinds of the questions that come before the Supreme Court. And I certainly don't want to be in a position where I have to recuse myself. What I would, if you allow me to answer this question, we are in a place where we are all campaigning virtually. And I would ask everybody to please go to our websites. I'm at chiefjusticebeasley.com, and go to our social media. We're all on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Like, repost, tweet, retweet, all of that. And the way you spread the message this time around is so much differently. But when you do that, and when you offer your own endorsements, other folks will do the same. They will say, hey, Brother Eaton said this, vote for Cheri Beasley. So they will do the same. And so that is a really profound way to spread the message about our candidacies.
Thank you.
What was the last part? Voter suppression, what else?
Voter
Sorry about that,
determination.
Representative Holley.
Oh, you go ahead. You go ahead.
You were about to, sorry about that. So I was simply saying that accountability, we have to be on our guard and holding people accountable, and make sure that our votes count. And again, it goes back to helping people and not being intimidated. If you're going to a precinct and someone is turning you away, seek help around that. But voter suppression isn't anything new. You know, we know the poll tax and all of those tactics that they use to try to keep us from voting. They had their day, and they're still trying that. But I want to go back to what I said earlier as well, is that it's going to be important around this particular, and this happens in all elections, but I think there's even more highlighted, that it's going to be important that we have our lawyers on board and ready to defend the rule of law and ensure that everybody has their constitutional right of voting.
I'd like to say that one of the questions that came up in the Q&A was asking what kind of legislation, if we had one piece of legislation, would we do? And I would like to say mine would be in the area of redistricting and some of the voter suppression laws that we in North Carolina have implemented in the last 8 years that I've been in the General Assembly. Those laws that we have done that allow for politicians to pick their districts as opposed for people to pick their politicians. And they have been the thing that has kept us and kept the Republicans in the supermajority for so long. And all of that will change. And I want to see those laws change because it comes down to the vote. And that is the most precious weapon that we have as a people and as a community, is our ability to vote and pick and choose our leadership and do it fairly. So that is, what I'd like to see. But I'd also like to go back and say something lightly. I'm a Howard University grad, and I went to an HBCU. And the stuff that I got from that HBCU has been immeasurable. It has given, I tell people that I went to high school in a predominantly white situation and never knew if the grade I got was really the grade I deserved, if this was something always questioning everything. And that HBCU at Howard University validated me. It not only told me that I was good enough, it told me that I was more than enough. And that is what a lot of our students get. They get a sense of self, they get a sense of self-worth, they get an opportunity for leadership at these HBCUs, and they're so important, and we need to make sure that our HBCUs maintain their strength out here.
Thank you. Well, we could go on and on and on. It seems like everybody, no participants are dropping off, but I want to say thank you on behalf of the 6th District for you all taking the time of your schedules. I know we moved some times around or some days around just so you all could make our call. So we certainly appreciate that. But as we close, I would ask each of you give some closing remarks. And let's not forget, we know that it takes money to run campaigns. So feel free to share with the brothers and those that may have joined us how we may be able to help you all between now and in November. So with that, Chief, would you like to start off with your closing remarks?
Mr. Eden, I'm thankful. I'm so thankful that we had this opportunity to share together this evening. This is quite an undertaking, and so I certainly appreciate your hard work on putting this forum together. This election cycle is important. I hope that you will support each of us. I hope that you want a Chief Justice who is courageous. I hope that you want a Chief Justice who is bold. I hope you want a Chief Justice who's not afraid to speak the truth and to stand in it. So I am honored to offer myself for continued service. Brother Eden is right. It is expensive to run. I will tell you that folks outside of North Carolina understand why this particular race is so important, because millions will be spent against me. That's okay. That happened to me in my last election. But we do need your help. If you go to chiefjusticebeasley.com, you can certainly make a contribution there. And I think often, and so many of you have already been so supportive, and I really do appreciate that. But I think often we think even $25 is not enough. But when you add 25 plus 25 plus 25, if half of you gave Reverend Singleton, Representative Holley, and me $25, I mean, it adds up, and it makes all the difference in the world. So I'm grateful for your willingness to have us here this evening. I appreciate your support. I'm honored to serve you, and I look forward to serving you in the future. And thank you all so very much for this opportunity this evening.
Ditto. Let me say that a lot of people think when they make a donation to their campaign, they're giving money, or they're giving it to Cheri Beasley, or they're giving it to Marcus Singleton. They are investing in a system or in what they believe in. It doesn't come to us personally. This money is spent. And we've been able to do an awful lot with very little, because we're able to get out in the communities and work. But this time, and particularly during COVID-19 and the pandemic, we've had to rely now on things like the internet, and those things cost money. So we're going to have to use the media that the majority has used for years, and it is very, very expensive. So that's one of the reasons why we talk about, I have a Talk About Me campaign. I tell everybody, talk about me everywhere you go, to my face, behind my back. Amplify our voices, like Justice Beasley was saying. Share something that if you get our letters and newsletters and Facebook, share it to your network. Talk about us. Do everything you can. And there is no donation too small. I had a thing where I was getting from Mayor Pete Buttigieg, did a post, and I was getting $1.13 donations. But when the end came, I ended up with almost $10,000 worth of donations that were $2.50, $1.13, $5, and those donations do add up. And it helps us to be able to buy airtime, to do mail, and to do some digital work. And thus, just so important to get the message out about us. And like for Marcus, this is his first time running. So he really and particularly needs a little extra effort, because they don't know him as well as they may know Justice Beasley or myself. So it's so important that we all get their assistance. And my website is YvonneLewisHolley.com. You can go and find more about my platform. You can make a donation. And I also ask for your prayers.
Thank you.
Engage, engage, engage. We have to engage on all levels. It's so important for this particular election that we have engagement from every facet, from donating, from supporting campaigns to getting on phone banking, whatever it is. Engagement is so critical. Talking to your own local officials and as well, and understanding the issues as well. So engagement, engagement, engagement. And then I would say that we need, for Cabarrus County, we need someone who is both a healer and a fighter. And electing me, getting your support behind me, you will have that person. Because we are in diverse or difficult times right now, where you both need someone to heal up a wound and then you need someone to fight on your behalf. So that is who you will have in Marcus Singleton. I want to encourage you to go to my website, marcussingleton.com, and you can learn more about me, and you can also make a donation there. But I just want to encourage everybody to engage, to get involved in the political process, because if our voices aren't heard, as Chief Beasley said earlier, then we can't make the impact that we need to make, and we can't impact our communities that are so desperately in need of our voices and our energy and work. So engagement, and thank you again, brothers of the 6D. I appreciate this invite and my ability to be on this platform with these distinguished guests here today.
Well, thank you all. Thank all three of you all again. I see we have the distinct pleasure to have our former Grand Bossless and brother Tony Knox of the 6D. So before we close out, I'm gonna let him have a few remarks.
Thank you, Brother Eaton, and good evening, everyone. I'm excited. I'm excited about our candidates. We have proven servant leaders. I know this is Marcus's first time running, but he has served in the military, he served as a minister, and he's proven. And Lord, our Chief Justice and our Lieutenant Governor candidate, they're proven leaders. They're not just politicians, but proven in every sense of the word. And they have earned the right to be where they are and earned the right to have this opportunity to lead us and make the state of North Carolina better. If brothers, this really and truly is a chance that we must go out and vote like our lives depend on it, as well as our children and our grandchildren. As stated before, they need resources to be able to run, to be able to have the commercials, to get the word out. Marcus needs to have the opportunity to get the word out. And as Chief Justice said, millions are coming in because they want that position. But we're on the right side of history. We must keep it. And I can't tell you enough. She's earned the stripe. But Yvonne Lewis Holley's father was one of my mentors. And from everything from my job to my rise in the fraternity was always with me and in my corner. And she is, as Marcus said earlier, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So brothers, without a doubt, I'll tell everybody that I'm voting for Chief Justice Beasley and for Yvonne Lewis Holley. And Marcus, if I could, I would vote for you, but I'll certainly be trying to encourage those down in Cabarrus County, where my brother lives. I'll make sure that he does vote for you. But brothers, I need you. I need you to be with me and go out and support them. Let's be the change that this country needs and bring forth the leadership that we need to make that change. They're more than just candidates. They're more than just candidates, and I think you recognize that. So I can't thank you all enough for coming and sharing with us. Randall, I can't thank you enough for the job you've done. And Brother DR, I can't thank you enough for making sure that the 6th District is aware and that the 6th District is educated and able to go out and support. We must put forth our resources to make sure that these candidates come out victorious. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brother Grant. Brother DR, if you take us out before Brother Travis comes to take us out in prayer.
Sure, my brother. I want to again echo the sentiments and thank everyone and thank Brother Eaton for a job well done tonight. Thank you to our panelists, and also thank you to Brother Knox for making a statement tonight and being present for the panel tonight. I want to leave with this word of information. I was on a call for the 4th District earlier tonight, and they had a voter education panel. And one thing they mentioned is that we have to be ready and alert because a lot of our senior population won't be working the polls that they normally work. And that means there will be a demand for a lot of our young people. That's what we want to have go in their place. And so we got to start spreading the word to alert our young people to be ready to work the polls possibly for this upcoming election, because they're already estimating there'll be a number of seniors that will pull out because their kids, their children will be stressing them to stay home and vote. And so, again, we got to be ready. So, brothers and sisters, again, thank y'all so much for the information that was shared tonight. And again, look forward to our upcoming events. Next week, we'll have our South Carolina candidate forum. And following that, we have our own brother, Ben Crump, who will be talking about the social justice issues relating to today's society. So, brother Travis Alexander, our district chaplain, please dismiss us with a word of prayer, my brother.
Brother Travis, one quick thing. I would like to thank our technology team because they do a lot for us behind the scenes that we sometimes forget. But I did want to thank Brother Ken Johnson, Brother Greg McCoy, for all the things that they do with our technology. Thank you.
With me, please. Dear Lord, we thank you for the successful completion of this empowerment forum tonight and the privilege and opportunity to have heard the platforms and sentiments of these three very distinguished North Carolina candidates who are campaigning in an unprecedented time of pandemic. We ask that you cover and protect them, their families, and campaigns with your grace and mercy, and give them the victory in November. Bless our beloved Omega and the mighty 6th District. Keep us, our families, our community of friends safe and COVID-free as we move out to serve you. Dismiss us from this virtual assembled station, but never from your omnipotent presence and divine will. In the matchless name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you all again, and everybody be
Thank
safe.
you.
Everyone.
Everyone
so
be
much.
safe.
Good luck.
Thank you
Good
all.
luck, everybody. Good luck.
Take care,
Thank
everybody.
y'all.
All righty.
Great job, Brother DR.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks again, bros. Appreciate it.
Hey, good luck, brother
Good luck,
Singleton.
Marcus.
And hit the road.
Thanks.
Do it justice, my brother.
Good program.
Indeed.
Take
All right.